Our story begins on Burke. Hiccup rushes to the great hall, determined to speak with his father. When Hiccup shows Stoic the horn from Heather's belt, Stoic takes him to the back room and tells the villagers that he'll be right back. The fire crackles low as Stoic turns the horn over in his hands. He runs a thumb across the carved knotwork, every line and curve familiar, every mark burned into memory. His silence grows heavy, filling the small chamber with unease. Finally, he speaks, his voice low and rough. When a chief has a child, the tribe brings gifts, from allies, from family, from every hand that wishes the babe well. But this, he holds the horn higher, letting the firelight dance across its surface. This was mine, a gift from my firstborn. Hiccup frowns, confused. Your firstborn? Stoic's eyes close for a moment, his shoulders sinking under the weight of the truth. When he opens them, his gaze is sharp, pained, but unflinching. A girl. The words hang in the air like an axe before the fall. Hiccup's breath catches, his chest tightening as if the world has shifted beneath his feet. Hiccup staggered back a step, the words echoing in his skull. A girl? You had a daughter? His voice cracked between disbelief and anger. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why hide something like that? Stoic's eyes flickered with pain, but he didn't look away. He set the horn gently on the table, as though it were made of glass. Because I lost her, Hiccup. Hiccup's throat went dry. Lost her? Stoic's voice grew heavy, like stones random together. Within 2 years, I lost both my wife and my daughter. Your mother, taken by the dragons. My little girl, swallowed by the fire and the chaos of a dragon attack. I searched. I raged. I tore half the sea apart looking for 'em. But they were gone. He sank onto the bench, his massive shoulders sagging, a man unmade by memory. I couldn't carry that grief and raise you, too. I thought, if I buried it deep enough, if I never spoke her name, maybe the pain would fade, but it never did. Hiccup's chest tightened. He wanted to lash out, to demand answers, but the sight of Stoic, so raw, so broken, rooted him in place. The fury drained from him, leaving only a gnawing ache. Meanwhile, Heather stormed ahead with her dragon, axe clenched in white-knuckled fists, her eyes locked on Dagur's ship. Every step was vengeance, every breath fueled by rage. Her friends called after her, straining to keep pace, but she barely heard them. Dagur's mocking laughter rang from the battlements, sharp and cutting, daring her to come closer. And she did, heedless, reckless, walking right into his hands. A line of hidden nets, ballistas poised, the glint of sharpened iron waiting to spring shut on Heather and her dragon. Hiccup urged Toothless onward, heart pounding as they skimmed low over jagged rocks. She never noticed the ballistas hidden among the cliffs, or the rope nets coiled and ready, but Hiccup did. Toothless, now! He shouted. In a blur of wings and plasma, they cut across Heather's path just as the first net snapped free. The ropes missed her dragon by inches, slamming harmlessly against the rocks. Heather jerked her reins, startled, as Toothless forced her back toward open sky. What are you doing? She snapped, fury burning in her eyes. Saving you from walking right into Dagur's trap, Hiccup shot back, voice hoarse. He leaned closer, desperation in every word. Heather, listen to me, please. Dagur isn't worth this. You'll die trying to take him on alone. I don't care, she growled, straining against the reins. He destroyed my home, my family. I'm your family too, Hiccup cut in, the words slicing sharper than any axe. Heather froze, her breath caught in her throat. Hiccup pressed on, urgent, pleading. My dad told me everything. You're his daughter, my sister. That horn, it was yours. Heather, I swear it's true. Her axe trembled in her grip, rage warring with disbelief. Spare him. Don't throw your life away for revenge. Don't let Dagur take any more from you than he already has. Heather's fingers clenched white-knuckled around her axe. Every part of her wanted to finish what Dagur started, to end the terror he'd brought to her island with one swing. But Hiccup's words cut deeper than her anger. My sister. Her jaw tightened. For a long moment, she didn't move. Fine, she spat, eyes still locked on Dagur's fortress. We do it your way. We take him alive, but only because you asked me to. Hiccup exhaled, relief flooding him, though the look on Heather's face was far from forgiveness. Together, the riders pulled Heather back from Dagur's trap. It wasn't easy. Her fury made her reckless. But eventually, she agreed to wait, to do things the right way. Reluctantly. The days that followed at Dragon's Edge were tense. Heather kept to herself, throwing her energy into patrols, training, and long solitary flights. She avoided meals with the others when she could, and if Hiccup or Stoic ever tried to approach her, she always found a way to change the subject or leave before the words, "We're family," ever came up. Meanwhile, the riders began planning. Dagur was too dangerous to chase blindly, and too clever to underestimate. Weeks of preparation followed, forging new nets and bolas, studying patrol routes, scouting his fleet's movements. Each night, they'd return to the edge with maps spread across the tables, Astrid arguing strategies while Fishlegs rattled off ship designs and defenses. Hiccup tried to involve Heather, but she remained silent through most of it, eyes dark and distant, her mind still on vengeance. Finally, the moment came. A storm had scattered Dagur's fleet, leaving one of his warships isolated and vulnerable. The riders struck under cover of night, sweeping in on Dragonback with precision. Bolas spun through the air, tangling sails. Nets dropped across the deck. Fire and plasma bolts cut off every escape. Dagur fought viciously, rallying his men with shouts and jeers, but the riders pressed on with relentless coordination. After hours of struggle, the battlefield stilled. Dagur, bound in iron shackles, was dragged across the deck, still laughing, still taunting Heather with every step. "You should have finished me when you had the chance," he sneered, even as the riders secured him in chains. The victory was theirs, but the air was heavy. Hiccup glanced toward Heather, searching for some flicker of relief, of closure, but found none. Back at Dragon's Edge, they sent word to Outcast Island, arranging for Dagur's transfer to the prison there. The others celebrated the success of their mission, but Heather kept her silence. Every time Hiccup tried to talk, she slipped away. And when the day finally came, when Dagur was gone and the edge was quiet again, Heather saw her chance. Without fanfare, she packed her things, saddled her dragon, and left. No goodbyes, no explanations. Only the fading silhouette of her dragon in the sky told Hiccup she was gone. Time passed. Weeks turned to months, and life on Dragon's Edge went on. Hiccup threw himself into the work of defending dragons from new threats, especially the dragon hunters, who seemed to appear everywhere with their ships, traps, and iron chains. Battle after battle, the riders struck fast to free captured dragons, building a reputation that spread even beyond Burke. Heather's absence was like a shadow none of them spoke about directly. Hiccup knew they couldn't force her back. If she wanted to reach out, she would. Until then, all they could do was wait. The writers themselves changed in the passing months. Astrid, always by Hiccup's side, found herself watching him more closely. The way he thought 3 steps ahead in every fight. The way he never gave up on anyone, even when it hurt. Feelings she tried to push down slowly grew stronger, harder to ignore. Meanwhile, the twins noticed something odd. Roughnet caught fish legs lingering at the terrible terror roost, slipping messages into their little mail harnesses with a sheepish look on his face. One day, the twins chased an incoming terrible terror straight to Fishleg's hut, and the other riders followed the twins for curiosity's sake. Roughnut and Toughnut assumed it was some secret crush, and of course they teased him relentlessly until Hiccup asked the twins to knock it off, and then he nudged Fishlegs to tell everyone what's going on with all the mail. The letters weren't to some mystery girl. They were to Heather. The edge fell quiet when he said it. Fishlegs explained in a rush how she'd written him first, how they'd been talking back and forth for weeks, maybe months, about dragon care, maps, even just daily life. She never mentioned Hiccup, never mentioned Stoic, and she made him promise not to tell anyone else. Hiccup tried to hide the way his heart sank at that. She hadn't reached out to him, not once, not even a word. He was glad she was alive, glad she was safe, but he couldn't shake the sadness creeping into his chest. If Heather wanted a connection, why not with her own brother? Suddenly, Hiccup thought of an idea, and then he suggested to his friends, carefully, that maybe Heather could visit the edge. The others perked up at the idea immediately, and though Fishlegs went red in the face, he didn't object. To Hiccup's surprise, the reply came swiftly. Heather agreed. When she arrived, the edge felt different, brighter, fuller. Fishlegs could hardly contain himself, fumbling over every word, cheeks pink whenever she so much as glanced his way. Roughnet and Toughnut immediately took to her, if only because she knew how to cook something beyond fish stew and charred meat, and they praised her meals like she was a goddess of food. Even Astrid warmed quickly, relieved to have another girl around who shared her sharpness and determination, someone who could spar with her without holding back. Snotlout, of course, threw himself headfirst into trying to impress Heather. His boasts grew louder, his stunts more ridiculous, half to get her attention, half to distract himself from how easily she brushed him off. Heather met his flirting with amused eye rolls, never taking him seriously, which only seemed to spur him on. And Hiccup found himself watching her with a quiet sort of wonder. For so long he'd been alone as the odd one out, the chief's scrawny, awkward son who never quite fit. Now, to have a sister, a real sister, close enough to reach out and talk to learn about, to share things with. It was something he hadn't realized he'd always wanted. The fire had long since burned down to glowing embers, the edge wrapped in the hush of midnight. Only the wind and the soft shifting of dragons broke the silence. Hiccup stirred from his bed, Toothless's ears twitching beside him. Something felt off. When he peeked out of the hut, he spotted a lone figure by the stables, quietly saddling her dragon. Heather. Heart tightening, he crept closer. You weren't going to say goodbye again, were you? Heather froze, then let out a sharp sigh. You weren't supposed to be awake. Hiccup stepped closer, anger and hurt clashing inside him. Please don't leave again. His voice cracked. Heather's hand stilled on her saddle strap. For a long moment she didn't answer, and then in a low voice, I never asked to be your sister, Hiccup. The words cut deep, but Hiccup didn't back down. And I never asked to be the chief's son. I never asked for Toothless or for dragons or for any of this. But here we are. He swallowed hard. You're my sister, Heather. That's not something I can just ignore. I don't want to. Heather looked away, her eyes glinting in the faint moonlight. All I can think about is the family I lost. My village, my parents. Dagur took everything from me. Being here, being with you, it just makes it harder. It's better if I'm on my own. Hiccup's voice dropped to almost a whisper. And don't look back at what you lost. Look at what you still have. Heather flinched at that. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The only sound, the restless shuffle of dragons sleeping nearby. Finally, Heather exhaled shakily, lowering her hand from the saddle. I can't promise I'll stay, she murmured. But I won't leave tonight. Relief washed through Hiccup, though he tried not to show it too strongly. He simply nodded, stepping back. That's all I'm asking. Heather gave him the faintest ghost of a smile, quickly hidden as she turned her gaze back to her dragon. But for the first time, she didn't climb into the saddle. In the days that followed, Heather didn't leave, though she kept her walls high. She spoke more to the others than to Hiccup, but little by little, the silence between them softened. They weren't quite brother and sister yet, not the way Hiccup hoped, but at least they were no longer strangers. Not long after, the riders faced a new turn in their fight against the hunters. Vigo Grimborn, cunning as ever, sent word of a truce. Hiccup, cautious but curious, agreed to hear him out. That uneasy negotiation set the riders on a path that led them to the defenders of the wing, a proud people who mistook Hiccup and his friends for hunters themselves. Mala, their fierce leader, challenged Hiccup's every word, her people bristling with suspicion. Yet Hiccup's actions spoke louder than promises. He risked himself trying to train a speed stinker, a dragon even the defenders feared. So, when Toothless bravely leapt into the pit to save Hiccup, it proved that he and his friends were truly friends of dragons. No controlled dragon would risk its life to save the ones who enslaved them, and later proved his honor beyond doubt when Vigo and his brother Riker launched a daring attempt to steal the Great Protector. Hiccup and the riders rallied to rescue the mighty dragon, turning suspicion into trust. By the end, the defenders of the wings stood not as enemies, but as new allies in the growing war against the hunters. One stormy night, tempers snapped. Snotlout went too far with one of his jabs at Astrid, crossing the invisible line he usually danced on. His insult cut sharp enough to draw the others from their huts, listening in as Astrid's voice rose, her fury blazing. She stormed off before she could say something she'd regret, leaving Snotlout staring sheepishly at the ground. When the others pressed him, he admitted, half whisper, half groan, what he'd said. Their advice came swift and unanimous. Get on Hookfang and get out before Astrid finds something to throw at you. Taking their warning to heart, he slipped into the night, heading for Burke. But the storm worsened, lightning splitting the sky. A bolt struck too close, knocking Snotlout from Hookfang's saddle. Hookfang screamed into the night, frantically searching, but the wind and rain swallowed his rider's scent. Panicked, the dragon retreated to Dragon's Edge, alone. The riders mounted a search, with Astrid begrudgingly joining her friends, only to find signs that someone else had gotten to Snotlout first. The trail led them to the Wing Maidens, a hidden tribe of women who lived high on cliffside nests alongside their baby razor whips. Heather, Astrid, and Roughnut made first contact, riding Windshear, whose kinship with the Razorwhips earned them a wary audience. Meanwhile, Hiccup, Fishlegs, and Toughnut stayed on the sea stacks far enough from the island not to be seen. Inside the Wing Maiden's village, Snotlout had already worn out his welcome. His bragging and blunders irritated the women until they strung him upside down in a cave to keep him quiet. When Astrid attempted a rescue, Heather and Roughnut stirred up enough distraction to give her a chance. But in the process, they revealed that they came to save their friend and where they're supposed to meet Snotlout. But then Atali explained that female razor whips are highly territorial around males because they will often eat their own babies. Snotlout is heading straight for their nesting grounds. Racing against time, the girls reunited with Hiccup, Fishlegs, and Toughnut. Astrid quickly explains the situation and the mistakes she made. They all quickly get to the nesting grounds, where they found Snoutlout stumbling through the trees, desperate to get back to Hookfang. The riders finally regrouped, rattled but together. That night, Atali offered them food and fire. Over dinner, she revealed the Winged Maiden's story, their bond with the Razor Whips, the vow to protect a species nearly driven to extinction, and the strength they had built by standing together. Heather listened intently, something easing in her chest for the first time in a long time. Their words, their unity, echoed pieces of her own life, of her losses, and of the family she had been searching for. When morning came and the riders prepared to leave, Heather lingered behind. She looked at her friends, at Hiccup most of all, with a soft, sad smile. "I'm staying," she said quietly. "The Winged Maidens, they understand. They've built something worth protecting, and I think maybe I can belong here too. But you'll always be able to find me if you need help." There were no long speeches, no protest, just nods of understanding and the weight of another goodbye that, for once, didn't feel like running away. As the riders took to the sky, Heather watched from the cliffs with the wind shear at her side. The horizon stretched wide and endless before her, and for the first time, she didn't feel alone. She had found a place where she could stand, strong and unbroken, among sisters.